Jane, Genesis, Tauranga, Queens and Sugar, Yvonne, Snowy Hydro, Fortescue WA, hi Kerry, Kalgoorlie, Singapore. Hey Chris from Singapore at Earth Track, welcome. Jacques, Tundra Resource Analytics, Joy IAG, Scott, hey Scott from McMahon. Okay, guys, we'll give it another minute or two while we just let people in. Todd Crowther, Chris Dumbrell, Bart. Okay, guys, those of you who missed the message and just come in, please just put your name and company and where you're dialing in from into the chat, please. I'm going to kick off. Very good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to this month's Mainstream Masterclass. I think it's fair to say that AI is just everywhere we look right now, transforming the way we live, transforming the way we work, how we make decisions, and certainly for all of you guys, how you manage your assets. Looking at today's attendance, just going through the list here: mining, oil and gas, utilities, manufacturing, rail infrastructure, public sector, golly, and beyond. Industries might be different. Challenges, opportunity AI presents are remarkably similar, though, across all your industries. So very delighted to have Jason with us. Introduce Jason Apps to you. Many of you will recognize Jason as the former CEO of ARM's Reliability and then Baker Hughes. Whether you've worked alongside him or been taught by him, he knows his stuff. He's been involved with Mainstream for a long time. He's now serving as the MD and Director of Asset Management in APAC for Accenture for the Industry X practice. If you've attended Mainstream before, you might know him as a workshop presenter. And he has done everything from deep technical reliability stuff in RCA and FAMICA through to APM and enterprise-wide asset strategy development. You'll also know that he's super generous with his wisdom and experience and always willing to share knowledge. I think, Jace, it's fair to say that your perspective and interest in AI started already with years ago in the work of predictive analytics, almost as a bridge to traditional reliability engineering and modern AI applications. Great to have you with us. Jason's authored a book before as well, called Asset Strategy Management, A Leader's Guide to Reliability Transformation in the Digital Age. And today's masterclass is called Practical AI Adoption in Asset Management. So please welcome in, join in, Jason. And if you've just joined the class and didn't hear the message earlier, please just chuck your name, company you work for, and where you're dialing in from into the chat. Over to you, Jace.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here. Just let me know you can hear me okay and see the screen now, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect. All right, thanks. Fantastic to be part of the masterclass. Always enjoy these sessions. I would just add that look, I'm happy to go through this content. I have been involved looking how AI can help in asset management for quite a while now. So it's a pleasure to go through this. Please view it as a conversation, and it's an exploration because we clearly, we haven't nailed this yet. We've got some tools at our fingertips. We can talk about how to deploy them and maybe chart a course on how we might get the most from them in the future. So with that in mind, we'll jump into the content. Please jump in at any particular point in time. Ask the question if you feel the need. If you're comfortable to do that, please do so. I'm just going to organise my screens here. Here we go. So initially, I'm going to take you back to March 2012. So a little while ago, I'm showing my age a little bit, but I returned from lunch one workday to an email from a client at that point in time called Mike. Mike had sent me an email that just said they're in, followed by go and have a beer. I just returned from lunch, so I didn't go and have another beer, but I was quite relieved. What he was referring to was the culmination, the end point of a rather long strategy optimization exercise. It had been months, somewhere around 9 months in the making. We were reviewing and optimizing maintenance strategies, maintenance plans for a whole port facility. So lots of workshops, lots of, it's kind of FAMICA-based, RCM-based analysis, really strong project, great quantitative assessment. So positive outcome. We forecast actually quite significant savings, millions of dollars in savings in maintenance and an increase in availability of around about 2% for the facility. So really significant outputs. And we had finally automated the transfer of all of that good work into SAP at the time. So I thought we'd nailed it, right? I thought this is just the pinnacle. We have optimized strategies using data, and we have put all that content into SAP master data and then pushed it electronically into SAP, all done through technical integration. And I thought that was fantastic. And the reason I thought that was the pinnacle was prior to that, I'd spent years optimizing strategies and having challenges with getting them into SAP. So, it's a somewhat manual exercise, really tedious, really hard to engage with planners, perhaps. So we charted a course where we could optimize and electronically group and electronically put into SAP the resulting plans. So I thought we nailed it. I did go home that weekend. Obviously, we had some celebrations, big end of a big project. I went back to that site in 3 months and was staggered to find, because an assessment had just been completed, that 98% of the maintenance plans that we put into the system had been altered. So just imagine, we'd spent 9 months reviewing these new plans with site personnel, so with reliability engineers, with planners, all of the key people. We'd all agreed on the activities. We bundled it up. We'd put it all into SAP, and within 3 months, 98% of those plans had been modified to various degrees, but some of them significantly. So at that point, my joy was dashed, and we went back to the drawing board. And you might say, what has that got to do with AI? Well, I guess it was the start of a journey for me around how do we actually improve this pretty significant and pretty important part of what we do, which I see as the foundation of everything. And so from there, I then went on a journey of, we actually developed our own technology to support the better management of content once it's inside of a CMMS system. We went through a journey of, do we lock the content down? Do we put really hard governance around it so we control it? I started thinking about, how do we connect with predictive analytics so that we can tie things together, because in some respects that was really siloed and not helping this whole process. So it took me on quite a long journey. I was with Arms Reliability. I was the CEO of Arms for quite a while. If I haven't met you before, we developed that technology. We actually eventually sold out to Baker Hughes. They acquired the company, and I worked there for a while, obviously. And now at Accenture, and the reason I'm at Accenture is that I think we're finally getting to a really pivotal moment in asset management where AI can really add some value, provided we do it very strategically. And I think we've got the bits and pieces. Our focus at Accenture is on operations and asset strategy alignment. So that is real-time alignment of strategies to operations performance requirements, and really AI-enabled asset management reinvention. So that's kind of be the basis of what I'm going to go through in a little bit of detail. So let's kick into it. We'll go through a bit of a current state as I see it now, and then we'll talk about, what can AI do? So what's AI? What can it do for us, and where does it fit? I'm going to talk then about what I think is the value barrier, because I think there's a pretty significant foundational bit of work we have to do to make this work. I'm going to talk about why now. So why is it important now? We'll talk about some pitfalls and what are some of the common things that people have found through attempting to apply AI to asset management. And then what do we do next? Where do we go from here, and what does the future look like? So the current state, my assessment is everywhere I go, and I think it's largely on the basis of organisation structures as they exist, and the technology that we have had in the past, and that is our EAM systems and our APM systems and our predictive analytic tools and all those things. The way that those things have evolved and the way that our organisations are structured, and then you sort of layer in the development of machine learning, digital twins, generative AI, AI agents, and all sorts of sensing technologies and many, many other things. Asset management has got really complicated. It's a really complex web of sort of structures and systems, hardware, processes, and I feel like we're hindering effective management of our assets. We fundamentally, we lack confidence in asset data and its accuracy. So our master data, work and cost recording, failure cause analysis, even our strategic decision making around assets, repair, replace, simply replacement age of assets, all those things, we just lack confidence still. And so there's lots and lots of products and services in the marketplace as well. So if you look into the market, there's lots of different technologies. There's lots of services offerings. There's subscription-based products we can buy. They're really sort of domain specialists around, because of the complexity of technology at our fingertips. Perhaps the problem being that we are getting more and more siloed. So this is the environment we operate in. And we're still finding that organisations have an unpredictable level of performance. We're probably still struggling with high costs. And we certainly have an unknown level of risk in most organisations. So we make decisions and we take action, and we actually are not aware of the risk levels that we're carrying in our operations. And we probably have now got low engagement of our workforce as well. So we got a real problem. We've got lots of complexity, got lots of technology at our fingertips, but lots of complexity, and we've still got poor performance. And you could probably add in now that we've got a pressure to apply AI. So given all that, what's the real problem? This is where we are. Now we're under pressure, right? Enter AI. What is AI and what does it do for us? So, and this is not meant to be a degree in artificial intelligence by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a simplification for me, and I think a neat way to sort of think about the sort of evolution, where we are now, where we're going, and what the different elements are perhaps useful for. So machine learning, which is considered a subset of AI, has been around actually since the 1960s, probably the late 90s and in the noughties, where we started using it for predictive analytics. So this is detecting anomalies in sort of multiple data streams, pretty much. And we train the models, and it can then detect when something's not quite right. And obviously the application for us is predictive analytics, asset and process health, rotating asset condition monitoring in particular. So really useful technology. It continues to evolve. We continue to apply that and get better at how we apply it to get further up the P&F curve. If you're familiar with that, we want earlier and earlier detection of degradation, and our technology is getting quite strong, and our hardware is getting quite strong to do that. We continue to evolve it. One caution there, of course, is that we do need to check the checker. So what's happening, of course, is that we've now got a proliferation of OT, and we've got sensors everywhere, we've got hardware everywhere, we've got sort of siloed bits of content and intelligence everywhere. So yes, it's a very strong capability. It is evolving, it continues to evolve, but it also brings some other things for us to think about. We've actually got to check the checker, we've got to manage those assets. I'd also, it's an also important note here that it's a constant evolution and transition. And what I mean by that is we have to be very careful and strategic in deciding where to implement predictive analytics. And because the technology is always evolving and the hardware is evolving in the sense of becoming more sophisticated and cheaper, we've got to be really strategic about continuing to deploy that where it makes sense and where it's cost effective. So that's machine learning. And then I guess the really significant change was November 2022 when ChatGPT launched, and we all become immediately familiar with generative AI. And I would say at that point in time, the world kind of went crazy. I actually remember using it to write the opening 5-minute intro to mainstream Perth. I can't remember what year that was, perhaps 2023. And it was actually at that stage even it was actually quite good. I wasn't a prompt engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but it generated quite a good speech. And so we all sort of played around with it and started to use it. I think that dipped for a little while, but it's certainly back now. Generative AI obviously is based on large language models. It provides a level of reasoning, really strong for research and summarizing content, those kind of things. So the application really around data mining, giving some structure to unstructured data, insight generation is really, really strong. And that's where we've tended to use it to help things like training, help investigation, help generating content, summarizing content. So, people now might go to ChatGPT and say, tell me the failure modes on a centrifugal pump and get a good list out. So people are playing around with that kind of content, and it's quite strong there. Obviously, you have to be conscious of the content it's been trained on, and as we've read in the media almost daily these days, you've also got to check the outputs quite a lot. I saw another news article this morning of a consulting report that had made up citations in it, so we know it can hallucinate. I guess what we've seen this really develop is chatbots, and chatbots are everywhere. So there's lots of products now with chatbots in them to help the user and perhaps help with some of that insight generation. But we do have a lot of them around now. And then we had the evolution of AI agents. So agents use LLMs, so they kind of automate with that reasoning capability. And they're really being pushed hard now and applied a lot to gain efficiency and productivity. You can kind of, if you do it well, you can leverage expert capability. It's kind of like having assistants, right? We can augment teams of people with agents. We started with single agent workflows. In other words, we're kind of task-oriented agents. The agent would do one thing. It still uses reasoning in there, but it would do one thing. And then we got to what people call agentic systems, which is basically a collection of agents. So we've got a collection of agents working together. And so you kind of have an orchestrator or orchestrator agents in there that are actually coordinating the activities, focused on following a kind of a large, perhaps more complex workflow. So quite a powerful technology. That's what we have right now. What's next is AGI, artificial general intelligence. You may have heard of that. This is the intent to replicate human thinking. So all of the current AI is really around pattern recognition when you get to the core of it. But AGI is next level, and it's about how do we make a computer think like a human. Now, we're not close to that yet. I don't think. There is speculation that it could be developed as early as next year. More common timeframes are around 2030. But at this stage, we still don't know how we're going to get there. And it probably will depend on an unpredictable sort of breakthrough occurring, which is what happened to get us to generative AI at some point, in the next few years to get us onto that timeline. Some people actually say it's still decades away. Having said that, people are already talking about ASI, which is artificial super intelligence, which people are suggesting will be 1,000 to 10,000 times more powerful than AGI. So, which is probably the jump from AGI to ASI is probably more believable, because I think you're just applying computing power to the same technology. But I guess it's quite staggering to think that's where we might be, maybe in 2030, 2040. Anyway, we're not there yet. So we've really got the machine learning, generative AI, and agents and agentic AI is really where the current sort of technologies are. And right now, in all areas of the business, and it includes asset management, digital teams in particular are being tasked with the board or the C-suite with applying AI. And so the question is, where do we start? What I found interesting is, particularly in resource companies and utilities, is that right now, when the digital teams prioritize where they're going to go, in most cases, asset management or maintenance is one of their 3 or 4 pillars that they pick off. And I would say the reason that is because they still know that there's a lot of value to be had in those areas. So given we're in this kind of current environment where we've got a lot of complexity and our performance is still not where we want it to be, and now we've got AI capabilities and technology, and we've probably got some pressure from digital teams to start thinking about how do we do this. The question is, of course, where do we start? So what most organizations are doing is looking at their asset management process. There's one on the screen. I'm not going to say it's the one, right? You can kind of tweak these a little bit depending on your industry or your environment or your organization. So don't read this as gospel. It's just an example of what an asset management process might look like. The point here is that people will look at this and they will then say, for each box, or maybe even they'll go within a box and go down to a sub-process and the elements to that box. Then how can we apply AI? And usually what they're meaning is, where can we use an agent? Where can we get some productivity gains, some efficiency? Where can we utilize and build an agent? So that's our current approach. Where are most organizations focusing first? Well, they'll look at that flow chart. They'll look for process bottlenecks. They'll look at areas where it appears that there's a lot of manual work to be done, maybe a lot of paper shuffling or transferring data from one system to another, those kind of areas. Might do some assessment around, where are we really getting some value leakage? Where are we losing value because we're doing things too slowly or not well enough? So that's the kind of way organizations are typically going about this at the moment. And the areas are pretty common that they come up. The areas that everyone seems to hone in on is planning and scheduling, turnaround optimization, perhaps precision maintenance programs, and maybe sort of rethinking, redeploying predictive maintenance at scale. There's a question, is there?
That was me, Jason. It was just a quick one, mate, when you were back
Sure.
on that last slide with the flow chart.
Yep.
And I was just trying to get it in my head. How would you describe that? Is that like designing something? Is that sort of a way to look at it? Is like, how do we use AI in the design process to fulfill those tasks?
Yes. So if you don't have a documented asset management process from where to go, Graham, then you would want to develop one. But you'll have bits and pieces anyway, I suspect. So this is like most organizations, they go, right, we want to apply AI agents or AI, and they usually mean agents. So where do we do that first? So most organizations will look at an existing asset management process. Sometimes they may just look at the work management process, right? They might narrow down right into the perhaps the plan execute part of this chart, right? Create a plan, create a schedule, create a task list, prioritize the work, notifications, do the work, etc. They may focus in just on that part and actually analyze where are we slow, where could we improve, where are we losing value, because that's where I'm going to go and try and apply an agent. That's what's happening right now. So a simple thing might be, well, we've got, planning, creating a package of work for each plan is taking us, I don't know, pick a number, 4 hours, and we think we could get that down to 1 hour with the use of an agent, because it's taking so long because people have got to go to different systems and try and get different pieces of content, manipulate it, put it all together, maybe put some requests in place for certain things. And so that's the kind of thing where you could potentially create some efficiencies and productivity by using an agent. And maybe I'll just make the note here that agents, there is a difference between an AI agent and automation, right? And people have been accused of what they call agent washing, which is someone who's just got automation and calling it AI. So automation is really just doing something automatically using rules. If any process you follow is just based on rules and logic, then you can automate it. And we've been able to do that for years, quite honestly. So we can automate things very well. An agent is an automation that requires some level of reasoning inside of it, which is the part that would normally be done by a human. So if, for example, part of the process is receiving an email that you have to interpret, you can't apply a rule to that. You have to put it into a large language model and get some reasoning and some understanding of what's inside of it, so that you can then do the next action. So for us in asset management, that might be looking across sort of documents and manuals of equipment, etc., to pull out certain content we're looking for. So you're using sort of reasoning before you can actually do a next step. And so that's what an agent is versus automation. Now, you could argue, is that important or not? Not really. If it's an agent or it's automation and it's providing value, then it's a good thing, is what I would say. But people have been accused of agent washing. Anyway,
Jason, just on distinguishing, there was also a question earlier in the chat just saying your views on the difference between machine learning and statistics.
Yeah, good question. Machine learning, machine learning is more pattern recognition, right, is what I would say. So statistics is analyzing data and drawing a conclusion from that data set, and then using whatever assumption or conclusion it is you derive from that data set, usually to then make some decisions around the data. So, quite simply, if you analyze the age of actually us on the call right now, you would have a whole lot of data around the typical age of people who attend an asset management masterclass on a Friday afternoon. Now, you could analyze that and you could come up with probably a normal distribution or something like that to represent. The data won't sit exactly on the line, but you'll get a representative distribution. Using that distribution, you can then make assumptions about how many people, what's the average age of people who attend a masterclass course in asset management on a Friday afternoon. So you kind of you analyze data, you generate some conclusions, and then you use that conclusion to make some decisions. Machine learning is different in that you're using historical data to build a model, yes, but you are teaching it to recognize anomalies in the data. So and so this is what everyone does, right? When we deploy predictive analytics, we get as much data, well, maybe not as much data but you'll get time series data of your sensors and monitors for the last 6 months, 12 months. You'll run it through the engine and you'll make sure you flag up where you had known points of anomalies. So you're teaching the model that this is what an anomaly looks like. This is what an anomaly looks like. This is what an anomaly looks like. And so it then teaches itself what anomalies look like. And you continue to teach those models throughout the course of the life, obviously, as you go. But it's really pattern recognition, looking for anomalies, machine learning. statistics, draw a conclusion, make some decisions, is how I would summarize it. Again, that's not a uni course, but that's how I view things. All right. So given all that, it's like this is how people are now being driven to apply AI in asset management, right? Show me the process, show me where the bottlenecks are, show me where I can be more efficient. I talked about where do people starting first. They're usually going to planning and scheduling, right? Or turnaround optimization in particular are the two common ones. And then we break up the planning and scheduling process and we'll pick something very specific, right? Complete the package for the plan or something. And we'll apply an agent. All of those things, here's my point. All of those things and that way of thinking, they will lead to efficiencies and productivity gains. But my notion is that we're missing the opportunity to reinvent asset management. So what we're not doing, if I go back to that process slide, what we're not doing is standing back and going, actually, how can we now do this whole process differently, given that we have AI at our fingertips? We're kind of looking at the current process and going, how do we actually get faster and better? A recent meeting with a CIO of a very large organization actually expressed the concern. His words were, I feel like we're just AIing bad process. So that's the caution, right? Now, if we make some efficiency and productivity gain, that's not a bad thing. And it's probably okay to engage the organization in AI and get people used to the concepts and those kind of things that we're going to do this. But it's not reinvention. And I think the time is kind of now to think about reinvention. And that occurs when we start with the objective and question how we could solve that with current technologies, right? So what's the objective of our asset management domain? And how could we solve that given that we have access to these new technologies, inclusive of AI and other things? That's the question. Now, you could answer that maybe a few different ways. I'm going to take you through one of the value barriers as I see it. So, and I'm saying we need to get unstuck before we AI, but just noting that AI can help us get there. So, if you've heard me talk before, you may have seen some version of this, but I still think this is the fundamental value barrier we have. And then I'm going to go on and talk about how we might fix it. So we have operating goals, right? We've got things that the operations have to deliver. And so what should happen is that we set an asset strategy. Now, when I say asset strategy is like whole of life focused, right? It includes asset replacement age, repair, replace decision making, the routine maintenance that we've got to do that's going to go into our EAM system, and monitoring strategy. Where are we going to put sensors? How are we going to monitor all those kind of things? What are the corrective tasks if we detect some degradation? What's our sparing strategy? Materials and supply chain optimization implications, precision maintenance requirements, shut strategy. I could go on, etc., etc., etc. Right? So we are deciding basically how we're going to procure, look after, and dispose of assets to deliver the operating goals. That's pretty straightforward. I would hope everyone would agree with that. And then, of course, once we've set the strategy, that can help us understand how much money we need. So that sets the maintenance budget, and we go perform the work. And what should happen then is that we should get a pretty good level of predictable performance and cost. So the lines, performance is always up and down, but we'll get quite a tight tolerance. We should be able to predict pretty well our level of performance, and we should have reasonable control of our cost. Now there's probably not many people who would argue that should be the case, I would suggest. I'll be interested if there's anyone on the call that disputes that, but it's pretty logical and obvious that that's how things should work. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in and tell me how it does work now. Is anyone willing to have a shot at what actually happens? Anyone confident enough? How do we actually do this?
Might just say the word reaction.
Yeah, right. So thank you for jumping in. Probably saying what everyone's got on their mind. So what happens is that we don't set asset strategy on the basis of operating goals. We set it on the basis of how much money we get, right? And I love this in organisations, right? What I call the budgeting game, and I find it fascinating with the sophistication we have that this is still how we do things, right? So we set our budget. How do we set our budget? Well, we usually look at history, maybe last year's bit of history, any upcoming major work we've got, and we've got a big spreadsheet probably going, or maybe even now we've got a sophisticated tool. And so we look at the routine maintenance in our EAM system, and we couple in some corrective stuff, and we think about major shutdowns and all that kind of stuff. And we do all that work, which is all kind of reactive. It's looking backwards, and we're not really focused on operational performance at all. We're focused on the work. And let's say we do that and we determine that we need 55 million to maintain the assets next year. So we worked it out. We know we need 55 million to do the work that we think we need to do. So then we've got to go make the ask. Do we ask for 55 million? Or why do we not ask for 55 million? There's the question. Anyone willing to answer that? Why do we not, if we worked out we need 55 million, why do we not go ask for 55 million?
We likely won't get it.
Yeah, not we likely won't get it. We won't get it. So because they're going to trim it, right? They're gonna take a cut off, which is what. And I've had these sessions before talking about C-suite conversations. We have to recognise this is the C-suite's job, right? They're not just being mean. Their job is to minimise costs, to maximise shareholder value. That's their role. So we got a problem because we're not incredibly good at justifying our decisions, but we need 55. We're probably going to go ask for something like 60, right? We'll ask for 60. C-suite will come back and go, well, we've only got 50. Sorry. We'll jump up and down at that point. We'll say we can't do it, etc., etc. But we'll go on with it because human nature is to do the best we can with what we've got. And let's say we finish the year and we come in at 53 million. We'll go back to the C-suite and say, told you we couldn't do it for 50. And they'll say, yeah, but you didn't need 60, which you asked for. And so we'll go around the roundabout again this year. And this whole problem, as crazy as it is because we don't connect the strategy and the work we want to do to the operating goals. We don't have that connection. If we could go to the executive and say we need 55 million to deliver this level of performance, and they say, well, you can't have 55, you can only have 50, we could run the model and go, well, then you got to live with this level of performance and risk. That's a different conversation, but we're just not in that position. And so the C-suite get to play their role, which is pressure to reduce costs. And actually, it's a little side note. I think as asset managers, we carry then a lot of that stress, right? Because we will innately do the best we can with what we've got. We can't really justify what we need to do. It's kind of in our heads. We understand it, but we will really squeeze the last bit out of assets and people to actually meet the goals of the organisation. So we carry quite a lot of pressure around this. But that's the challenge. That's where we're at now. What that leads to, of course, is that because the strategy is not connected to the operating goals, we'll end up with a much greater variance around our performance and cost. We will be out of control with production and operations, and our costs will be hard to manage because things will break that we weren't expecting, and we'll get catastrophic failures, etc., etc. So it's a really not a great place to be by any stretch of the imagination. So the way, let's go back to how it should be, of course, which is that operating goals should set that asset strategy, that should set the budget, and we go execute the work. So budget and execution should be a function of asset strategy. And asset strategy is a function of the operating goals. That's just how it should be. then the asset strategy and the domain that we operate in, asset management, is to meet the operating goals at the lowest cost that we can, given the current operating context, the duties of the assets, maybe raw material makeup, asset ages, asset conditions, the environmental conditions, the maturity of our organisation, our maintenance capability, obviously the cost of lost production, and then any other impacts, operation priorities, maybe ESG goals, etc., etc., etc. So there is a lot of data along with the asset goal, or operating goals, I beg your pardon, that are fed into making our asset strategy. The point I want to make here is that these variables are dynamic. So strategy alignment is ongoing. We need to be dialing up our strategies all the time as the duty of an asset changes, as the cost of downtime changes, as the availability of materials or spares changes, as asset condition changes, as assets get older. All those things will affect what we need to do on an asset, what our strategy is around, when do we replace it, do we repair it versus replace, what routine maintenance do we do, where do we put sensors and actually monitor, etc., etc. All that stuff is dynamic. So fundamental shift is that we have to recognize that this is a process, not a project. Setting strategy at the moment is somewhat viewed as a project, start and finish. You do it, you do the work, you optimize perhaps stuff, you decide what you're going to monitor, put routine maintenance into your EAM system, you put sensors on the asset, and then we sort of walk away and let it do its thing. And of course, as soon as we do that, things are changing and the strategy goes out of date. So it's important to recognise that this is a process, not a project. And once we get there, here we go. We can actually make things work and align constantly. So why don't we do that? Like I'll go back to the slide. Seems pretty straightforward, right? Like that's pretty easy, is it not? The way to do that obviously is to do some assessment around how you develop your strategies. The concepts of RCM and FAMICAs and all those kind of things have been around for eons. I did my first project with Weibull analysis and an RCM strategy in 1998. So long time ago, we've had the technology and the capability. Why don't we do it? Why are we not following through on this kind of real value barrier, as I'm calling it? And fundamentally, well, there's a number of reasons, I guess, but which is effort. We've got this project-based mindset. So it's hard work. We kind of think we do it and then we're done. One of the main problems is if you don't do this in a very quantitative way, so all number driven, you can't update it. So if you do this in any kind of qualitative or subjective way, you actually can't review, you can't get that cycle going. So it needs to be quantitative, and in some cases it's not. One of the real challenges here is connecting to brownfields content. So if you've had an operation that's been going for 20, 30 years, you've probably been through a few EAM upgrades and shifts, but you will have a staggering amount of intelligence in the content that you have. A lot of existing plans, might be unstructured, might be messy, but you will have a lot of value in that existing content that you should be able to utilize. Most people want to be able to utilize. Certainly in the past, it's not something we've been able to do very easily or well. So it's made it really hard. And so the foundation of strategy content, if you like, has always kept very siloed from work management content, and they're not equal. So in asset strategy kind of thinking, we talk about FAMICAs and that failure mode based structure. So we have an asset, failure modes, and then we do tasks. And yes, it gets more complicated than that, and there's lots of variables in there, but that's the kind of basic structure. And that is not equal to how we structure our work management content, which is on assets and then plans, and however you make up a plan, maybe a task list, job plan, documents, long text, whatever it might be. The problem we've got is that those two data sets are not equal. They don't connect. And so when you do this work, what happens is the asset strategy on its way into the work management system becomes somewhat of a one-way upload. It's often manual, and sometimes you have post-processing changes along the way. So people change it between strategy and getting into work management. The second problem, of course, is once you get it in the system, if you do that, like we did at that project in 2012, then the master data can be changed in the system over time, because people will change the work management content in the work management system. And, it's really difficult to get this live connection. And therefore you end up with this really cumbersome feedback loop that's often got this overbearing governance on it, because we try to lock people down not to change content. So this part here, to me, is the real reason why we've hit this stumbling block for probably a couple of decades now. Now, people will talk about, well, we can key the information together, right? So we've got assets and tasks in the strategy content. We've got assets and plans which have tasks on them in the work management content. So we can just key those things together. That's kind of true, but the data models on either side of that connection are so complex that that actually doesn't allow you to do anything much other than just kind of see that those things are connected. So there's no solution there. Technical integration is possible, like what we did in 2012. We had an electronic connection where we could put content from the strategy area, package it, and actually electronically push it into SAP. But you're still only connected on that single connection point. And once it's in, that was SAP at the time, your EAM system, it can get changed anyway. So this fundamental problem has existed, well, since I've been a reliability engineer, and we continue to try solve the problem. If you've got a greenfields plant, it's actually reasonably straightforward, because you haven't got any legacy content. It's reasonably straightforward to generate the strategy, package it up, put it into the EAM system. The problem is, once it's there, you've now got a brownfields. People are going to change it, and now the update's hard and difficult. So it's a real problem, and it stops that whole value barrier I put up before. This is what stops it. So what do we do about it, and why am I talking about this in an AI session? I think this is where we can get some leverage. So if we want to create that real-time agility, we want to connect asset strategies to operating goals. Let me talk you through this diagram a little bit. On the left, we've got, let's say, the asset strategy area. Now, there's a few technical solutions in here. Predominantly, people will have an APM product, or maybe some reliability tools, or something. And in some organizations, that may even be a spreadsheet, right? But they'll have some kind of, hopefully, some content around, we've done some Famicas, we've done some strategies. So you'll have some kind of solution there. But this is the strategy content. And hopefully, if it's not quantitative, you need to move to a quantitative solution. Otherwise, you can't actually get this going. So that's got to be quantitative. The whole goal of this area of the process is to provide optimal asset value, deliver uptime, cost, and productivity. We've got our work management process, and obviously we have a technical solution, which is our EAM product. That can be any one of the typical solutions around. It's got structured master data content. It's also got lots of unstructured data, probably long text, probably documents, loads and loads of content, history, all sorts of stuff in there in an unstructured format. The objective of work management is to manage the work, obviously, support planning and scheduling, and it's really about efficiency, right? We want to affect our work efficiently. So that's this part of the process. And then we go execute the work, and then we get some feedback. That's fundamentally what we do. So what I'm saying is the solution to the connection of the content is to create a unified data model. So truly connect these things together. That does not mean key the data together. That means understand the data map on both sides. And this is not, it's not super complicated, but there's nuances, and you got to think through this. And let me talk us through just a little example. So I might have a Formica structure with assets down to failure modes and then a task that I've got to perform. I'll put that on a package of work and it goes into my work management solution. On the package of work is also content that relates to isolations, safety, extra safety, equipment, maybe task instruction details, so how to do the task. Maybe this single task is part of a, 2 or 3 tasks that you do together as a work instruction. So there's a lot of content in the master data that's beyond what's on the task in your strategy area. Now, if the continuous improvement requires that task to get, let's say, in an optimal state, we can now not do it 4 weeks, we can do it every 12 weeks, right? So we want to move it from the 4-weekly plan to the 12-weekly plan. It's like, now what comes with it on the work management content? Which bit of the safety stuff, which bit of the isolation content, which bit of the instruction? Does it even make sense to do that given the complexity of the asset? So there's a disconnect between those 2 data sets, which make it impossible to do this dynamic dial up and dial down based on what's the current operating context is. So, however, if we create a unified data model, we will understand these many to one and one to many connections on either side, and we will be able to do that change. That's the first problem. Get the unified data model sorted out. But then, of course, it's leveraging the existing brownfields content. So all of the existing plans and good intelligence that's in all of those plans, documents, job plans, instructions, etc., etc. So this is, to me, where we can be AI enabled, because one of the things that generative AI is great at is putting structure to unstructured content. Not only is it wildly efficient at doing it, it's actually very good at doing it. So what we can do is put that across our existing plans, and we can create some structure around it such that we can make it part of this unified data model in a way that we can then manipulate and move content based on a new strategy. Obviously, in the unified data model, we're going to have more than these 2 data sets. I'm focused on these 2 at the minute because this is where the key connection is, but obviously we would ingest all the relevant OT data. Predictive analytic content's going to come in here so we can make decisions around that as well, and various other data sources. So that's fundamentally, I think, a key building block for us so that we can add significant amount of value in asset management with AI. This picture is pretty simple, and obviously it can be solved in several ways with different solutions. And agents obviously can then work across the domain, right, as required to get efficiency and productivity. I would much rather have this going and use agents to enable it than just look at my current workflow and process and just use the agents, because I'll get productivity and efficiency. I won't get value uplift. There's also tons of opportunity for AI in the work execution space, right? Like field worker enabled technology is really come a long way to allow tradespeople to find information, get insight, record information, contribute content, etc., etc. So a lot of things where we can play, a lot of areas where we can play once we sort out this structure and this process. But the unified data model really is the key, and the use of generative AI. One of the things I would say, one of the challenges where we've been to try and make this work in the past is to lock content down. So we've kind of had really rigid structures in our strategy assessment. We've had really rigid structures in our master data. So we do a new implementation of AEM. We're really prescriptive around what does the data structure look like? How is the content put in? And then we put this really strong governance in around, if you want to change master data, you've got to fill out, request forms or Excel files, and it routes and approves and all those sorts of things. So we kind of, in an attempt to solve, I think we actually went too far with governance because we thought that was the right thing to do. One of the outcomes of that perhaps is that we've demotivated people a little bit, particularly field people, kind of getting to the point where we're not asking them to think, and certainly not innovate or contribute to continuous improvement. So I think there's a real opportunity for us to open that back up the right way, because because generative AI can put structured to unstructured content, it actually can enable some localization of the content, right? Like sites like to own their content. They like it to look the way they like it to look, and they maybe structure things a little bit different, and maybe they've got really good reason for that. One of the benefits of this sort of approach, I think, would be that you can allow localization to a large degree, because you can always use this in the cycle to put structured to unstructured content. We don't have to be so rigid. Gonna have to keep moving. I'm going to run out of time here. So why now? So lots of AI we can use in lots of spaces. We can go really hard on solving that value barrier with generative AI. Why now? Why is now such a pivotal time? I think for me that we're really positioned well because of a couple of key pressures. One is cloud-based ERP, EAM solutions, which a lot of people are going through upgrades, or maybe they've already done that. A lot of people going through new installations. Seems to be a bit of chopping and changing in the industry right now. People, moving away from their current system, going to new systems, or at the very least upgrading to a cloud-based solution. And there's also a digital drive for AI adoption, right? So there's also this focus from the organization, from the digital team, where can we use AI? And as I said before, in most of the conversations I'm having, asset management is one area they're focused on because they think we can improve. Those two are really key for me. That they provide us some, I think, some areas where we can attach our conversation to. And we can actually use those initiatives to support what we're trying to achieve from an asset management perspective. The other couple of areas that sort of play in is that the APM solution marketplace is quite competitive. The capabilities are advancing quickly in the areas of health and strategy and integrity, all part of that asset strategy. So people are also switching APM products, looking for new ways to do things, maybe even looking for multiple tools where they used to have one, all those kind of things going on. So there's also another initiative happening for a lot of organizations that play into this. And within those products, there's lots of generative AI initiatives sort of happening. So there's a lot going on where I think if we can sort of wrap our arms a little bit around that and actually leverage some of those initiatives for our own benefit, I think we can go a long way. And it's a really good time to, from a domain perspective, get involved in those conversations and hopefully elevate the conversation to not just AI current process, but kind of reinvent the process. The caution here is that if we don't do that, some of the decisions that will be made as part of those initiatives, if they're run in isolation, have the potential to cement sort of legacy processes and capabilities, and that will be a constraint. So the challenge here is how do we make sure that we don't create a future constraint for ourselves through some of these initiatives that are happening right now? That's a very real risk, I think. On the flip side, the opportunity is that I think we can get significant value uplift through working with some of these projects. I think we could connect a few things together, and from maybe just incremental investment, you actually can get yourself in a much better place because we understand the value. So I think there's lots of opportunity here. What one exec in a meeting I was in actually viewed this as a once in a career opportunity, and I know that's a fascinating view, which I agree with. If your organization is hitting any of these things right now, we are probably in a once in a career opportunity to make some changes, do things the right way, be very innovative and support the future, and not cement in current bad practices. So good opportunity for us. I also think this provides a fantastic opportunity for our people and our teams. I think I would extend reinvention not only across data and systems and solutions, but across our teams as well. I've long held a belief that we need to develop small performance-oriented teams covering asset management and work management domains with common goals. So quite often in organisations, you see this sort of separation of, I don't know, reliability engineers and the maintenance team. Sometimes the predictive analytics team is separate again. Maybe there's even a separate RCA team. And so, and sometimes they're corporate groups versus site groups, those kind of things happening. And it feels very fragmented to me. And what I've certainly seen firsthand is that if you can get a single team focused on a common goal that we're all aligned and enabled to work on and deliver, then really good things happen. Really good things happen. So I think it's an opportunity for not only to reinvent the technical process, but the team of people that are executing the process together. Precision maintenance, I think we can focus on leveraging intelligence that we have in our trades workforce and our technicians that we have on hand. Like I think right now, I sort of touched on it before, I think we kind of lock things down. You follow the plan, you follow the work instruction. It's kind of hard to update content. It becomes very sort of demotivating. And I think we've got to flip it the other way. I think we've got to enable those teams to contribute to our knowledge collection and our content. And if we can redeploy that knowledge and that content wherever it makes sense and get people focused on improving all the time, then I think we will see a significant uplift. I think tradespeople have a lot to offer, and we don't yet enable that well for them to contribute. And certainly have enable a deeper emphasis on recognition of diversity and inclusion. I think we've got a lot to learn from everybody. So lots of work to be done, and I think this change can give us perhaps an opportunity to rethink the team structure as well and how we manage towards delivering asset management. So this is a little bit getting back to where I started in terms of the value barrier and how do we address this problem. So it's just applying it to this diagram. What I'm saying is that once we've executed the work, we get current plans, we get history, asset condition, operating data, everything comes in there. We've probably got some templates, and we use generative AI, creating that unified data model to feed asset strategy decisions, remembering that asset strategy decisions have all those different parameters and variables in there that we need to use to make those decisions. So this really is about turning legacy data into information and knowledge. That's that Gen AI piece. And again, that's what it's really good at. It's really, really good at. And in some ways, we're using it to do some of that, but we're not putting it into a loop. We're not making it part of an improvement loop. And as I said before, it allows for localizations, updates, and preferences, which I think is also important from an engagement perspective. So good opportunity. So that's the high value of generative AI. What's the high value of AI agents? I mean, we can use agents in that continuous improvement process for sure. One of the areas where I think we can extract some really high value from the application of AI agents is in agentic optimization. So we need to move beyond individual agents to solve process bottlenecks, and we need to look to how we solve performance optimization. If you look in asset management, we would have several solutions to optimize different decisions. We've probably got a solution that helps us optimize the task interval. We might have a different assessment and optimization that delivers repair, replace decisions. A different one that helps us optimize shutdown intervals and perhaps shutdown alignments. So, we'll sort of have these different tool sets or different modules or different approaches to determining different things that are part of the asset strategy. I think the opportunity for us is to really connect those things together. So you can imagine multiple agents, maybe even running those different optimizations, feeding to orchestrators that actually put all that together, running some scenarios to determine what we actually do. Because in the real world, there is tons of variables that feed into a decision. You might be able to, in a very structured way, determine that, this needs to be replaced, so we need some CapEx money. You might have the CapEx money, and you might have constraints on CapEx across the next few years. So how do you then go back to your decision making and optimize on that basis, and then change tasking? So it's a kind of a multi-layered optimization around your asset strategies. So I haven't seen this yet, but I do think this is the future, where we'll see orchestrators having multiple agents working together to truly optimize those asset strategies across that whole asset life, given that every asset we have is at various stages of their asset life.
Hi, Jason.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry for the interruption.
Sure.
Would you mind going back to the previous slide, please?
Yep. That one?
Yeah. Like, considering that the existing, in most of the organization, the existing is the budget constraint, where initially you have the arrow, the budget directing our asset strategy.
Yep.
So in this sense, how does that application of generative AI look like if the maintenance, the budget constraint is defining our asset strategy?
Yep. So the difference would be that the strategy that you determine, you could put a budget constraint on it. This cycle would not change, right? Like what can't change is what is the actual optimal strategy to deliver the operating goals. That you can figure out, right? And so using the process, you would figure out, well, here's the strategy we should put in place. Let's say it works out, this is what we need to do, and it's 55 million, and a budget constraint comes in that's 50 million. The process, of course, and we have the technology to do this now. The technology will be able to tell you what will happen if you constrain the budget, the tasks that you do, to cost 50 million. And they're very sophisticated tool sets. So you can actually do that in a way that you will have to play with planned and unplanned work, right? Because as you remove, if you're an optimal state, when you removed planned work, you're going to see some increase in risk of unplanned activity. So it will be a trade-off, and you can model that. I've had a very interesting experience at a facility where they were your traditional facility. The strategy was set based on budget. They did some high-level cost assessments, determined they were in the wrong quartile for their liking compared to their competitors, so they wanted to move up a quartile. That required them to reduce their maintenance budget by 10%. We actually did the modelling of that post that decision, and actually determined that they couldn't physically reduce the maintenance spend by 10%. They could reduce it by about 7.2 or something percent. So they could reduce maintenance costs by 7.2%, but that would have an impact on production. Production risk would go up, and likely production would come down because they're reducing their spend. But if they tried to cut further than 7.2%, they got into an area where unplanned failures kicked in and cost more. So it was like there was an absolute bottom of the curve, which there always is for maintenance, right? If you stop maintaining anything, at some point it's going to blow up and cost you more money. So there is a fundamental minimum that you can get to. So this is the kind of environment where you would determine the strategy, put the budget constraints on it. You would then be able to say, we can do the work, we can do this work for the 50 million, but here's the increase in risk and the potential lost production we're playing with. That's exactly the conversation we want to get into. Now, people still may make the decision, right? Like, that's okay. People may say, well, we've only got 50 million, so we're going to have to live with the risk. My point about that all the time is that puts the risk decision squarely with the C-suite who are making the decision, or the executive, or whoever's making that decision, not with the asset manager. Because right now, if you're an asset manager on the call, you're probably carrying that risk, right? We're operating with the budget constraints we have. There's a certain level of risk that comes with that if we think we need to do more than that. So I think it's a good question, because every organization currently operates that way. What we need to do is influence that operating mechanism. We need to do this work first to determine a proposed budget or spend, if you like, such that we can challenge any constraints that we're given. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Jason.
Yep. All right. We're up to here around, I think we covered the optimization one. I do think the future here is that we'll see combined and connected process production optimization and asset performance optimization will be in a single sort of strategy, maybe even solution, right? Like that landscape is changing. I think that'll absolutely happen. So what are some of the pitfalls around this? Lots of words on the slide. I'm not going to go into all these things. I think the notes down the bottom are probably the guts of it. AI, it doesn't really fail on process or sort of data or insight generation. Sorry, it doesn't fail on mass process insight generation. It fails on data quality, design of it, adoption, can be an issue, integration and ownership is also an issue. So fundamentally, we have to understand it won't fix bad data, right? So we do need to be careful about whatever agents or AI we're putting in place. It's got to have access to the right data it needs to do what we're asking it to do. I think there's also a really important view, given the way organizations are moving right now with agents, so looking to deploy agents all over the place. And maybe we've got suppliers who have products where they've got agents included or other sorts of AI in there. We just need to make sure we've got a framework in place to sort of support and manage and govern all the agents that we have. So there are, platforms around now that provide that level of governance over and management over AI agents, which I think is important. Interesting. There's also, it's just a side note here. There is a current pivot to vanilla EAM implementations at the moment. So lots of organizations who are moving EAM system or upgrading. It seems to be a bit of a pivot in the marketplace to go to vanilla implementation. So remove all the customization, probably because it was costly and makes it difficult to upgrade perhaps. But that's certainly something that we need to keep in mind as we approach the asset management space and how we think about how we're going to deploy AI and how it can help is we may see some significant changes to processing capabilities through the vanilla application of EAM solutions. And there's also a bit of a shift to best of breed or maybe even in-house technical solutions for the strategy area, right? So it's interesting, the APM products, every APM product was almost kind of expanding and getting bigger and covering more and more and more. So that all do health and strategy and integrity and RCA and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are a few organizations now that are going, well, no, that's too difficult for one vendor to provide. We're going to go select a strategy solution. And we're going to select an asset health solution. And we go select a integrity solution. So there's this it's a changing environment at the moment. And I just put this note in here because it potentially creates some opportunity, but there's also some caution there because it creates challenging integrations and potentially more data silos. So when we're talking about a unified data model, we may be dealing now with more than two main ones. We might need, there might be 3 or 4 that we've got to bring together the right way and very, very well. So potentially a bit of work for us to do there. I just want to make an important note that predictive maintenance is not an island. And I've put this in really because it's a bit of a bugbear of mine. Obviously, predictive maintenance has been around for a while. It is AI, it is in asset management, and it is absolutely a critical aspect of our asset care philosophy. However, if it's pursued the wrong way, you could almost view it as a modern day run to failure. And what I mean by that is that we are letting assets run until we detect degradation, and then we rush in and change before the failure occurs. I'd ask you for a minute just to imagine the environment where everything is monitored and we don't do any routine maintenance. And I've actually had someone suggest to me that that's the future, right? we're not going to do any routine maintenance. We're going to put sensors on everything. Of course, the problem with that is that you will constantly be called to assets because degradation is detected to do individual tasks. So that's the end of the spectrum. No one's there, obviously, but that's kind of indicates the danger. With predictive maintenance, if we don't do it the right way, we can end up being very reactive. If we have it in a silo, in isolation, we can be very reactive. Yeah, and yes, we save an unplanned failure, so that's a good thing. But we're being very reactive, and so we can probably be better than that. It can be expensive with low ROI if we don't do the right cost assessment around where do we implement this stuff, and all of that generally happens when it's an island from strategy and work management. So it's set up by itself, and it's just we don't connect it in with the other things. Obviously, the flip side is the opportunity is significant. So we can go beyond detection to diagnosis, prognosis. We're getting stronger at that. If we can link it to the right corrective tasks, that's really, really important. If we can talk about, well, if I'm going out to the asset to do a repair, what else do I do while I'm there so it can meet the next campaign life? Really important. And also a question around, well, I got degradation and I prevented an unplanned failure, but did the asset last as long as I expected? Or did it even last longer than I expected, which maybe we did something well and good and we can learn from that. So it can't be an island, this. It's got to be connected into your broader strategy. And it's critical to manage the OT assets, right? We have to, as more sensors and hardware go out and maybe more individual bespoke products go out, we have to manage those IT assets, and that is a growing market place for service provision. In fact, Accenture does that as well, because you probably don't even know what OT assets you got in place right now, and that can be dangerous. I'm going to skip over this one a little bit. It's just kind of a summary of the things we've talked about. I think the important piece here is foundational capabilities and then applying AI. And I'm just saying we have to get the foundational capabilities right. Otherwise, we will just be constrained to putting agents on bad process. So get all the foundations right: unified data model, master data quality, quantitative strategy optimization, etc. So then we can do predictive asset analytics the right way, extracting intelligence with AI. That's a Gen AI across the legacy data, connected work orders and engage the workforce, etc. And then agents and agentic down there. So how do we move forward? This was just a bit of a philosophical slide I wrote, and then when I finished it, I realised that geez, data is important to me. I've got here the foundation of successful AI is data, right? Probably no surprise to anyone. I think it's important we recognise data is a ongoing process, not a project. So we don't just do master data projects. We've got to think master data management is part of a process. We have to do continuous data validation of that content so that we can drive good decision making. Unifying the data sets, important, data again, and prioritize master data management as part of the process. We have to recognize the work management process is king, and we have to work around that. Technology adoption will follow once we've sorted out the data and the process. That's the first step. So don't select technology too early, right? Go sort the process, sort the data model, and the right technology will then follow easily. And then we'll get to this execution-led solution, which I think is the right way to go. So summary slide. You've got to have an integrated, objective-driven, unified data model. I've said that numerous times now. I think it breaks the value barrier. You've got to create some AI readiness, so that's through awareness for people. You've got to set up the right processes and governance around AI agents in particular. You've got to have this digital thread from strategy to execution and budget, and have that conversation around budget constraints. And we've got to have leadership and cultural maturity. We've got to have the right level of sponsorship. And I think we've got to approach this from a team perspective, not just a technology perspective. The two parallels I would say moving forward are AI agents on existing processes is okay, and that's probably where you might be getting pushed in your organization now. It can it can engage the workforce and it can normalize AI in the organization. So it's not a negative thing. We just have to be careful, those cautions. Don't AI obey a process. And this is just one thing we need to be doing. We need to look up a level and reinvent with AI. And that's a journey with a roadmap, creating that unified data model, finding the right solutions, and then getting that process going. And that is the last slide. So took quite a while there. I don't know if we got time for questions, Lisa, or we need to wrap up.
Yeah, no, Jace, we have. I'm going to go straight into one because we've got a few minutes. Great comment by Chris Scripton saying this is all good. However, one of the biggest issues looming will be the quantity and quality of trades in the field to uphold these inputs.
Yep. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think Chris, that was a Chris, right, that asked the question. It's one of the reasons I'm really big on moving away from really strong governance of standard content and allowing localizations and engaging field workers in continuous improvement. I think, I don't know how or why, my gut tells me there will be a bit of a shift and we will see some reinvigoration of trades careers. And I think we need to support that by recognizing that this is what we need to do. We need to recognize that we have very intelligent, capable, creative people in trades who can contribute to this process, right? Like we will continue to lose capability if we strongly govern content and expect people just to follow a process every time without contributing to it. So the use of the right field worker technology to enable them to contribute to the collection of the intelligence and the evolution of the content, I think is one of the ways that we get the engagement going and maybe elevate that very important skill set.
Jace, there was another question, an obvious one that always comes up on hallucinations.
Yeah.
And your views on how hallucinations in generative AI could be managed. And the questioner just said, while guardrails can reduce risks, they aren't really foolproof. And does this mean that the human in the loop approach is inevitable, particularly for critical processes?
Look, I think organisations will always have a human in the loop to start with, right? And most organisations have sort of mapped out a transition from sort of humans being part of that process very significantly to start off with. Like we're checking it at sort of every step. It's true to sort of slowly back away as we get more confidence in the model, if you like. What I would say about hallucinations is, if you ask Gen AI to create content, so you're asking it to put new content together, it will hallucinate. So, it will. This is fascinating to me, but I fed ChatGPT my daughter's resume and said, tailor this for this job. And I did that a few times, and as it worked down, it actually started making up where she went to school and what university she was at. It actually changed them, even though I'd fed it the info, just because I'd gone through a couple of iterations. If you refeed it the original content, it's fine. So it can kind of drift. Or if you asked it to create content and say, go write me a technical paper on AI and asset management, it will make up stuff. Potentially it will hallucinate, particularly around citations and research that doesn't exist. So that's a real risk. If we're using it for training and education where we're sort of creating content, that's a real risk. For what I was talking about in the guts here around using it across historical data, it's much less likely to hallucinate when you're asking it to sort of summarize and put structure around unstructured data, because it's kind of got the information in front of it and it's doing a task as opposed to creating content. So yes, we have to be careful. Yes, humans will be in the loop. I think for particular applications, we'll see humans retreat quite quickly.
Jason, before I just hand over to Lisa to thank everybody, thank you for taking on such a broad topic and getting it into just under 90 minutes for us. For those of you guys on the call who are not a member of the Mainstream Community Network. We've got thousands of pieces of content on there. This masterclass, the recorded version, is going to be loaded up there this evening. So I'm just going to drop the link to that free community into the chat and then hand over to you, Lise.
Hi everyone, really great to be here. And first of all, to acknowledge Jason, who you are such a pro, Jason. Beautiful communicator, really cares about everybody here, and always has huge value. Like everything Jason does, his experience, your expertise, Jason. You're an educator, and just a fantastic session. It's such an important topic. In fact, we just did the research for Mainstream. There are many of you here in the Mainstream community. Many of you have been to Mainstream, and AI came. We just did the research for the Perth Summit, which is actually in March. There are many of you here who are actually coming along to that on the 18th of March. And AI came up actually there were 12 topics that came out of our research, and AI was number 6. So it's much higher than last year. And a lot of people are very confused, and they know they don't understand a lot about it, but know that you've kind of got to get your head around it. So Jason, thank you for, taking us there and having everybody provoke thinking and what you should be thinking about more of or less of or whatever it is. So I'm sure you've all taken away some great stuff here. I know many of you have messaged during it saying fantastic session. And it is awesome to have you all here. You're a very important part of the community. It's wonderful to have you within our Mainstream online community, which is ongoing, where you get these fantastic masterclasses. As you see, Jason's absolutely evidence of that. They're monthly. We love having you. You're always going to learn. This is all about knowledge sharing, all about exchanging. And the big news for the Mainstream community is actually we've reached our 30-year milestone next year. Can you believe it, Jason? Our 30th year anniversary, so it's going to be a big year for the community. And the Melbourne one's back on the 6th and 7th of August. There are masses of you here who are at Mainstream this year. So put the 6th and 7th of August because you don't want to miss it. And thank you everyone in the spirit of sharing and exchanging and peer-to-peer learning and what you gain from each other in this community, giving back, helping each other stand strong, solve problems, exchange knowledge, etc. It's fantastic to have you. You mean a lot to us. And Jason, you mean a real lot to us. Our relationship goes way back, Jason. And thank you. Thank you for everything. So have a great weekend, everyone. Take care till next time. And we'll see you very soon.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. See you soon.